You are listening to the 80s Slasher Librarian. Keep listening, or I'll kill you.
There's a lover.
Jason X to the Third Power, Chapter 3. "Oh, this place is so lame," Linda said. She rolled over on one of the two single beds she and Brad had pushed together. Not as comfortable as a bed for two, that was for sure. Nothing here was as comfortable as she would have liked it to be. She glanced around the cabin, which would easily have housed a dozen campers. What's with this icky, moldy chalk color? Why couldn't they have painted the walls something interesting? This entire place sucks. The housing, the grounds, God, the people for sure, especially that freak. How the hell did he get to be the leader of this team? He's a moron. He's leader because he's the relative or something of Jackson Mansfield, Brad said. Don't worry, pet. The work will be interesting. Consider it a vacation. Right. Linda sat up, then stood up, naked, her voluptuous form almost undulating as she headed for the washroom. Brad watched her, thinking that she was both lovely and annoying. He didn't really care about the annoying part. Most of his ex-girlfriends had been annoying to some degree. That's what happens whenever you're rich. But Linda at least said a lot of what was on his own mind and took the heat for it, so he didn't have to. That they had gotten this gig together was okay by him. He could handle 6 months of a fun project with great pay, amazing workout facilities, the latest computers, and a woman to have sex with whenever he wanted. He just had to cajole her sometimes when she got into too big a snit over something that was usually quite petty. "Hey, Major Tom, you there?" Brad yelled. "Indeed," the voice said. "Listen, are there any maps of this place?" "My memory banks contain 2 extensive maps of the Moon Complex and environs. 1 topographical of the complex, 1 celestial. There is also..." "Celestial?" "The sky is visible through the dome." "Okay, I'll take the topographical map. I want a copy printed out and on my desk in an hour." "Remind me, Mr. Simpson, where your desk is located." "Hey, keep the attitude to a minimum," Brad snapped. Major Tom did not respond. "Okay, forget the paper map. Just tell me about the grounds, how things are laid out." "Within the area formerly known as Camp Americana." "Not here, the rest of the Moon Complex." Major Tom paused, and Brad didn't like it. It was as if the AI had some sort of attitude or a sense of superiority or something. But this sort of thing couldn't be programmed into it. He was about to express his displeasure when Major Tom said, "Camp Americana takes up approximately 1/1,000,000th of the Moon Complex. Much of the remaining area is virtual, as well as unexplored." Major Tom seemed to mock. "Cool. What else is here besides the camp? I mean, in the way of non-virtual buildings or structures?" "The only other structure on Elysium is the former military complex, which now houses a prison." "Where is it located?" "Approximately 3.2 kilometers from where you are now positioned." Did Major Tom seem annoyed? "Give me the layout of the military complex." "The structure is roughly 4 times the width of Camp Americana and is housed along the camp's eastern perimeter. The building is a 9-story above-ground structure with underground facilities as well. The building is pentagonal in shape. The largest floor is at the top, and successive floors narrow down as they descend." Major Tom was in seemingly a hurry. "The interior resembles a Byzantine labyrinth in design. I believe the intention of this design was to hinder any attack. Anything else?" "Attack?" Brad laughed. "From who?" "I no longer possess that information." "Okay, so there's this building that was a military complex. What did they do there?" "Conducted experiments." "What kind of experiments?" "I no longer possess that information." "So what's there now?" "A prison." Oh yeah, I forgot. What? It takes up the entire complex, I gather. It is housed on the 2 upper floors. The prison is escape-proof and impenetrable. Who are the prisoners? I no longer. Okay. You're getting annoying. How do we get to the military complex from where we are? Turn left outside your door and follow the main road past the last cabin. Then continue along for approximately 1.6 kilometers, at which point you turn left onto a dirt path and head uphill. The path, approximately 3/4 of a kilometer long, will take you directly to the military complex. Is there only one path leading off the main road? No, there are many, at least 24. Then how the hell will we know which road to turn off on? Talking to the AI? Linda asked as she returned. I'm trying to get info out of it so we can explore. So, how do we know which road? Brad asked Tom once again. Only one road leads to the military complex. All the rest are dead ends. Again, this was meant to deter attack or penetration of the building. You will see a sign that reads, "To Military Complex." That is where you'll turn. Linda laughed. Good one. So we're going to go there? Might as well. We can grab a bottle of wine, some bread and cheese, and I hope Anyar didn't count the loaves, Linda interrupted. She was always interrupting people. And we'll have a romantic picnic under the stars. What say you, fair damsel? I am honored, kind sir, and your wish is my command. Brad pulled Linda down onto the bed and straddled her naked body with his. Hey, she shrieked. I just showered. You'll get me sweaty again. That's my intention. He laughed, his lips coming down hard onto hers. She reaches the corridor where the floor is splitting from both ends toward her. Tension builds through her body and she is paralyzed by the inability to make a decision that will save her. From the gloom, a large blade appears, light from nowhere glinting off of it, blinding her momentarily. She wants to scream, but nothing comes out of her mouth. I can control this, she thinks. This is just another dream. She does not know who thinks this. It seems strange to her, alien. She only knows that the arm holding the sword is massive, mostly covered by metal. It is an arm that even under the best of circumstances she could not fight, even with her entire body pressing against it. And she knows in her heart that there is more to him than just a muscular semi-human arm. Even as she thinks this, an image appears out of the darkness. Beneath her feet, the floor is separating, widening, pulling her legs apart, and she knows the chasm forming under her is a tomb. The image becomes clearer as light touches it. A face. Not human, but somehow human. He wears a mask, one that is shaped like a metal face, with holes for nostrils, larger holes for eyes. Eyes that she cannot bring herself to look at. Eyes that burn into her when she does finally glance up at them. They are living fury, beyond human. They are the eyes of a predator of human beings, and she is his prey. The face looms closer. Her body trembles, every cell screaming for help that will not arrive. The blade lifts up and comes at her as if in slow motion. Her mouth is still open, a scream struggling to emerge. The blade suddenly moves fast, slicing her. She feels a small pain at her neck, and she believes for a moment that the sword has only nicked her, until she sees her body on the ground without a head, blood spurting up through the neck as her entire physical being tumbles backwards into the dark chasm that is her doom. But another body falls with hers, someone she should recognize, but the head is missing. And then she sees the head separated from the body, falling into the grave with her, and she cries out. It was a shrieking sound that woke Skye, and she found herself standing beside a bed. It wasn't her bed, but a bed in a large and empty room like someplace in the country. It took her a moment to realize where she was. The shriek came again, and she turned toward the window and hurried there. Through the glass she saw a bird, large and black, one that resembled the old ravens from original Earth. She had only ever seen pictures of them before. They were big, beautiful, intelligent birds. But the pictures she had seen were accompanied with stories, and in every story the raven had portended some awful event that was about to happen. Skye shivered as a chill invaded her. The dream rattled Skye more than usual. This time she remembered more of it. This time someone else was killed. Someone she cared about. There was no one in her life she cared about except her mother, and that was not who was in the dream. Although she couldn't now remember what the other person looked like. But she had a strong sense that the killer had murdered not just her, but a man, and she could not think who that could possibly be. The other thing about the dream, and it was the first time she could remember it, was the face. She knew that this was no human face. Her murderer was only partly human, and he wore a mask to hide the fact. Skye was covered with sweat, her clothes damp, so she changed quickly into shorts and another tank top. Pulling her hair up off her neck, she slipped into sandals and left her cabin as quickly as she could. Darkness was just settling over the camp, but she didn't mind. She felt relieved to get outside and to air away from her bed. Going to sleep had become so much more frightening lately. This was the third time she'd slept in the last 24 hours, and it was the third time she had had the nightmare. And each time it seemed stronger, and she felt more cognizant of the image and what they might mean. Somehow the horrifying dream seemed to be coming to life. But that, she knew, was not possible. At least she hoped it wasn't. Solar lamps illuminated the camp area, which took on a more desolate feel, if that were possible, than it had in the daytime. Skye walked slowly up the road, heading toward the store for something light to eat. And then she planned to get started at the lab, setting up her programs for both the group project and for her own. As she passed the cabin that housed Linda and Brad, she heard laughter. The door suddenly swung open, and they came bouncing out, laughing, playfully swatting and hugging one another, carrying a basket. And as much as she hadn't really liked either of them right from the get-go, something about the childlike nature of their relationship, as she was seeing it now, made her feel envious. Had she ever been a child? Had she ever felt playful? Had she ever been in love? Skye knew she had been deprived of certain aspects of growing up. Suddenly, she was struck with the realization of how lonely she really was, how unconnected she was to any other human being, and how she'd always been like that. On top of the nightmare and the raven flying by her window, this realization culminated in an instant depression. As the happy couple raced past her and entered the store, she hung back, deciding that she'd go there later. Instead, she walked to the lake at the far end of the road. There she stood, gazing at a lonely lily pad floating on the surface of the tranquil greenish water, feeling very sorry for herself, hearing the crickets chirping in the background. Fate was so unkind with some people. It was so unfair. Nice view. She spun around to see Free walking up behind her. She turned back to the lake, feeling a mixture of emotions, from inexplicable joy to abject terror, to foreboding and a sense of being trapped. I've never seen a real lake before. She felt she had to respond to that. She couldn't just walk away. There isn't a real lake. It's part virtual, part artificial. That's what this is. She turned her head slightly, but didn't look at him. What? Have you lived on a dead star all of your life? I lived on a satellite. She looked at him. You're kidding. Nope, not kidding. My mom ended up on one. In this solar system, of course. And I was raised there. This is really my first time off the satellite. Well, that's not exactly true. I took a few shuttle trips to neighboring planets, and twice I visited the surface of planet 795, the one the satellite revolves around. But it isn't a very nice planet, full of helium, heavy gases, and so much water you can hardly find a piece of dry land, and... Wait a minute, Skye interrupted, turning her entire body to face him. Isn't 795 the planet that Jackson Mansfield owns? Free shifted, and his eyes left hers and reverted to the murky water of the lake. Yeah, and a few other planets in that sector of space, and quite a few satellites, too. So that's how you got to be the team leader, right? You're Mansfield's kid. No, I'm not his son. If anything, he's been a mentor to me. Free felt defensive and heard that in his voice. He tried to disguise it by hardening his tone. And I earned this job. I achieved the highest score on the intergalactic science test. You should know that. You came in second place." Her jaw dropped open. Asshole, she thought. I came in second because of a family crisis, and I had financial problems and had a hard time getting to the test site, something a privileged brat like you wouldn't know much about. Before he could respond, Sky turned and stormed off. Sky wondered at first if Linda and Brad were still in the store, and then realized that she didn't care. She'd lost her appetite. What was there in life but work? Relationships of any kind with other human beings seemed impossible to her. She headed to the lab knowing that she would find that place interesting, and she could set up her workstation. And best of all, she would be alone, and so she wouldn't become annoyed. At least, most of the terror associated with the nightmare had passed. Getting angry had its advantages. Free stood at the lake, steaming mad. What the hell just happened? He'd been trying to be open and friendly, and this bitch just tried to snap his head off. And for what? Because he'd been born on a satellite? Jeez. He knew nothing about women. He knew, but now he didn't know if he wanted to know anything about them if they were going to be like this. She's not what she seems to be, Major Tom said. Huh? Free looked around. How come you keep sneaking up on me and reading my mind? I'm just speaking the obvious. Did I ask you to be my personal computer and interact with me about my private life? MT was silent. Hell, what's the difference? You might be my only friend here. Still, the computer was silent. Free heard laughter in the distance behind him and turned to see Linda and Brad, arms around one another, carrying a basket between them, as they headed down the road past the cabins into the twilight. Going to spend some time alone together, making out, he figured. He then watched Sky enter the lab, presumably to do some prep work, if not to get away from him. What was wrong with him that he couldn't become someone's friend? He'd started off so badly with everybody here, especially Sky, and he couldn't figure it out, not at all. It was like his genes were no longer what he thought. They were loner genes, or something like that. MT? He asked. Yes? What else is obvious about me? After a pause, Major Tom said, You worry too much. You should trust your true nature. You're a man of action, and actions speak louder than words, as they used to say. Maybe you have a point, Free admitted, but then again, maybe not. Time will tell, Free thought. He decided to walk around the lake, even though it was large and would take quite a while. Maybe there was artificial life in this water. Any life at all would be good at this point, as long as it didn't try to bite him. And here we are, Brad said, nodding at the sign and letting go of Linda's hand so he could shift the picnic basket to his other one. The battered wood and steel sign at the head of the dirt road read, To Military Complex. Under that, there was a smaller metal sign warning, Prohibited Area. That was then, Linda said, lifting her long, flowing skirt with one hand. She would never admit it, but sometimes she didn't like wearing period costume. A gown like this was awkward for long walks. Although once they were seated, she knew she would look like a ravishing dream, and she also loved the idea that she and Brad were coordinated. It convinced her that they were meant for each other. She dated so many jerks that it was nice to have a sensitive guy, finally, who conformed to her aesthetic and who agreed with just about her every thought. Obviously, he was highly intelligent, and very rich, as anyone could see, and handsome, not to mention pretty good in bed. Maybe at times he was a bit too attentive, and his snobbish attitude and vernacular could be grating, but almost no one was perfect. They walked up the very narrow path, her velvet skirt getting caught here and there by the brambles that had overgrown the road. Suddenly she heard a rip. Damn, this sucks. True, Brad said, but he sounded as if he hadn't been listening, or even realized that her hem had just ripped. She looked up to find him staring at. It's a fortress, Linda said. Directly in her path, over the hill, stood a massive structure. She counted down the 9 floors that Joe the cabbie told them about, each smaller as the building headed toward the ground. The top floor, the largest, was certainly larger than the entire moon camp. Brad thought the pentagonal shape and the diminishing of the size of each floor made the entire structure look like a big screw. "I wonder if there's a basement," he said. "I think Joe said there was a basement. The way this thing seems driven into the ground, you'd expect there's something below the surface holding it all up." Linda thought the structure looked impenetrable, like a medieval castle. "What do you think it's made of?" "I'm not sure. I think the outside is polymorphine, and there are probably nanogrids and boron holding the thing together. But I've never seen anything like it. Those slits might be windows." "Do they remind you of windows that you might find on a castle? The way they're so narrow and vertical and all?" Linda asked. "Yeah, they used to call them gunwells or something. Guards would be in there and shoot from the openings because they could see far and wide, but the enemy would have had to be a pretty damn good shot in order to hit such a slim opening." "Maybe the windows are virtual. I've read that a lot of buildings now use virtual windows." "Could be. I mean, the whole area surrounding us is... So, what's to stop the windows from showing the occupants of the building whatever they wanted to see?" "Well, it's amazing," Linda said as they approached the structure that towered above them, as if it touched the sky. "That top floor looks like one of the major long-voyage space vessels could land on it." Brad laughed. "Well, on the roof, that's for sure. Hey, look, a ramp heading down." "Do you think it goes around the entire building?" "I'd say so." When they came right up to the ramp, Brad said, "Yes, it does. Look, you can go all the way down to the bottom, and the building narrows even more. What a weird concept. It's underground, but it's exposed." They looked at one another, eyes sparkling, like 2 children about to engage in some mischief. They burst out laughing and started racing down the ramp at the same time, Linda holding up her skirts as she ran. Brad took the lead, partly because of his physique, and partly because he wore pants and didn't have all that fabric to contend with. But he felt no need to win this little race, and it would make Linda feel good if she wasn't left in his dust, so he slowed himself down until she could catch up. The ramp had a good slope, and while the floors continued to grow smaller as they went down, it was still a massive building to run around. Again, he was reminded of a screw being turned into the ground, as if this structure was meant to be permanent, and nobody would ever get it out. Finally, when they were both pretty winded, Linda more so, Brad saw the bottom in sight. He put on a burst of speed. Despite having convinced himself that he didn't care who won, in the end he did, and he wanted to show off his prowess. Linda ran her heart out, but knew she couldn't best him. At least she would get there close behind and not lose face. He might be stronger physically in a lot of ways, really, but she had him beat mentally and knew it. Down at the bottom, they both doubled over, panting and gasping and laughing between swallows of air. Eventually, Linda looked up. "Holy shit!" Brad followed her eyes. It was like looking right up into heaven. She had been in taller buildings by far, but something about the architecture of this structure that just forced you to put your head way back and bend over backward left the feeling of being towered over. She didn't mind so much medieval architecture was the same, or so she'd read. Gothic cathedrals were designed with that in mind, so ordinary people would get a feeling of God peering down at them. Linda, though, didn't have that feeling of God or anybody else benevolently peering down at her, but she did have a sense of being watched, yet not from above. She looked around them. "There's no grass here, nowhere to sit." "Sit or fuck," Brad said, pulling her to him, kissing her long and deep on the lips, his hands finding her breast covered in velvet, getting her aroused all over again. She both loved and hated his crude language. Sometimes it made her hot, like right now, and even though they'd had sex twice already, she wanted to do it again, but not on a hard slab like what was under their feet. She pushed him away roughly, looking stern, then said, "Hey, If you want to do me, boyfriend, you'll have to find someplace softer for my ass to rest. Who says your butt has to rest on the ground? He grabbed her roughly and pulled her to him. How about you rest on me? I'll sit on the slab. You sit on the stick. She laughed, and soon he was undressing her, pushing the lacy shoulders of the dress down, exposing her lovely and full breasts, and lifting her skirt up and removing her antique bloomers. Brad undid his pants, lowered them enough, and squatted down, lifting Linda on top of him. She squealed, and he really did like that sound. Sometimes he wished she'd squeal all the time and just stop talking altogether. The moonlight felt warm on her shoulders, impossible as that seemed. She adored having her breast exposed. Brad had grabbed her ass and was lifting and lowering her, and she knew they'd probably do it a long time because he had to build up steam, and that was A-OK with her. She faced the building and focused on one of those vertical slits that functioned as a window or whatever. Her eyes opened and closed as she went up and down, riding the pony, feeling ripples course through her body. His mouth found one of her nipples and her head fell back. Her eyes opened a little and her gaze took in the enormity of the structure, so phallic-like, looming above her. It was as if she was being fucked by the building, and that made her even hotter. Her breathing quickened as the heat built within her. He was like one of those old-fashioned pistons she'd read about. Continuous motion, hard as a rock, relentless. Just as Linda exploded in orgasm, her eyes clamped shut and then opened. She saw something in the slotted window that killed every sensation that flooded her body. Suddenly, she began screaming. Brad figured she was getting off big time. He held her tighter, pumped her faster and harder, even when she started beating his shoulders, screaming for him to stop! Let me go! Finally, he realized this was no expression of ecstasy. She was going batshit crazy. Brad stopped, released her, and Linda jumped off him, running, shrieking, heading up the ramp half naked. Wait! He called. What? The window! She yelled. Run! He looked at the window and saw nothing but zephyr glass, or a good imitation. He even went right up to it and peered in, but it was too dark inside and he couldn't see anything at all. Brad shook his head, bundling himself back inside his pants, and slowly climbed the ramp after her, thinking of how much of a crazy bitch she was, ruining a great fuck. Maybe she needed medication. Anyar had just stepped out of the gymnasium feeling refreshed after a late-night workout when she heard yelling. It was one of those times she wished she had real vision, not just computer-simulated impressions. The voices sounded like the obnoxious Linda and the simpering Brad. They grew louder, and she moved down the road toward the cabins, now seeing the shadowy images flapping around before her. When she got close enough, she could hear a breathless Linda saying, "And then we saw something. I don't know what. Not human. It had a metal face and eyes that were dead, but it moved." Whoa, Free said. Hold on, that's crazy talk. There's nothing at the military complex but the prison, and that's hidden within the building on the upper floors. Absolutely no prisoners occupy the floors below it. Not a prisoner, Brad said, sounding a bit more level-headed, but somebody. Not somebody, Linda insisted. Something. I know what I saw. It was a monster. Describe it again, said Sky's overly calm voice, and Free wondered at the interest in minutia that she had exhibited since they'd met. Listen, he said, I don't think we should be encouraging them to. I want to know, Sky insisted. If you don't, then you should go to bed or something. I don't know, just let them talk. Anyar didn't hear a response from Free, but she did pick up a subtle intake of breath, and could feel with her heat sensors that his body temperature had escalated. It was huge, Linda said. Male or female? Male, I think, like a giant from a fairy tale. Was it humanoid? Very much so, but big. I'm telling you, it was an ogre. I think we got that part, Anyar tossed in. This Linda was just a tad melodramatic. Okay, Sky said. You say this guy had a metal so he's got a physical deformity. Is that any reason to call him an ogre? Anyar said. Forget being politically correct, Linda screamed. No, I didn't get the impression it's a deformity, Linda sobbed. It's like the metal face is his face, and whatever is under it is so, I don't know, inhuman or something that his face has to be covered. Why else would he be wearing that mask? That sounds like what I said. He has a physical problem, and the metal is a prosthetic. I don't think so, Linda sobbed again. I think it's not human. Sky sighed loudly. All right, where did you see this guy or thing or whatever? In a window, Brad told them, his voice even steadier than before. He was coming to his senses, or at least Anyar thought so. What floor? Sky asked, above or below ground level? How do you know there are floors below ground level? Free asked, his voice suspicious. Because, Sky snapped, impatient as always with him, I did my research. What research? There's nothing available about the military complex. Because you couldn't find it? Sky quickly turned to Linda and asked, So which floor was it? I don't know. Maybe the 12th or 13th level? What the hell were you doing going to that building? It's off limits to us, Free said. There are only 9 levels up, Sky said. We didn't go up, Brad jumped in. We went down. It's like the building is screwed into the earth or something. And as you descend, each floor gets smaller. We went down to the bottom. I think it must have something like 9 levels down, too. But we didn't count because we ran down the ramp that goes around the building from ground level. At the bottom, it looks like there's just one 5-sided room down there. Did you go inside the building? Free asked, his voice hard, trying to piece all this together. No, we didn't, Linda said, the hysteria easing up a bit in her voice. Then how do you know it was one room? Because, Brad said. Like I said, we ran around the outside, and it was small enough to be a room by the time we got down there. Everyone was quiet for a few seconds. Herbert joined them, too shy to ask what they were discussing. Anyar, whose sense of smell was acute, said, You guys were drinking, weren't you? After a pause, Brad said, Yeah, so? It was an alcoholic, but something with an herb in it. Anise, I think, or wormwood? How do you know that? Linda asked, astonished. The nose is quicker than the eye. Smells like absinthe to me. Absinthe, Free said. What's that? A strong alcoholic liquor, over 68 proof, made with wormwood or anise. There's a psychotropic ingredient in the wormwood called tahone, which can act as a hallucinogenic. They drank it on the original Earth in the 18th and 19th centuries, and then it had a brief surge of popularity at the start of the 21st century. The voice was Herbert's. He does know his stuff, Anyar thought. Linda's voice was furious when she said, So you think we imagined this? Could be, Anyar laughed. Well, we both didn't. Both Brad and I saw him. Did you? Sky asked, looking directly at Brad, her voice tight. Linda spoke for Brad. Well, he didn't exactly see him. Brad jumped in to rescue her. Linda did, though, and if she says she saw him, she did. Seeing is a funny thing, Anyar said. For instance, technically, I don't see, but I can see, in my own way. There are a lot of ways to see things, you know, and when you've had a few, that makes a big difference. Especially if you had a few with such a high alcohol level, Herbert said, full of confidence suddenly. Oh, cut it out, Linda snapped at him, ignoring Anyar, making Herbert shrink into himself. Anyar heard Herbert even take a step back. I know what I saw, Linda insisted. He was big and he looked brutal. I'll never forget those cold, inhuman red eyes staring at me, as if he wanted to kill me, just because I exist. It was the scariest thing I've ever seen in my life. Sky turned and walked away from the group. She had to think, and to do that, she had to be alone. This couldn't be. It just couldn't. What Linda described sounded like the killer in Sky's repetitive dreams. Her whole body began to tremble as she made her way to her cabin. Dawn was encroaching over the artificial horizon, but the impending light only made her feel more vulnerable. Why was this happening? Could this be Jason? The information she found said that he was dead, killed 20 years ago. Totally, forever dead. Thrust out into space. He could not be here now. How could he still exist? She reached the bathroom inside her cabin just in time to throw up. Not having had anything but fruit juice since her arrival, nothing much came out. Dry retching followed, and she knew it was because her nerves were on edge. So far on edge that she thought she might snap in two. But she had to get a grip. She had to get a grip, she told herself. The first chance she had, she would go to the military complex herself. If he was there, she would see him with her own eyes. She knew who he was and what he was and who had, if not created him, using his DNA to replicate the original. After cleaning herself up, she lay in the dark, listening to the AI-generated bird song that had been modulated to seem as if it were emanating from outside the cabin. "Major Tom," she called, "I am here." "Shut the damn birds up." "As you wish." She wished she could shut off the worries inside her head as easily. Her body still seemed to be trembling as she dropped into a pitiful sleep, jolting awake every few minutes. Snatches of dreams were filled with the metallic masked face that she recognized when she was asleep but could not remember on waking, searing through her unconscious. It was as though a part of her was telling her to wake up before it was too late. Now, in the snippets of her nightmares, he was even more brutal. That horrible weapon swung by such a massive muscular arm that no human being could stop it, cutting, slicing, severing, every time she closed her eyes. She watched her body as if it was dismembered, her limbs sliding off of her torso and dropping into rivers of slippery blood that splashed into the air. Red blood that gushed from her arteries and pulled rapidly as it seeped from her veins. Now the bad dreams were filled with not just the face of the one she does not know, but felt she cared about, but other faces, many, each streaked with agony. Suddenly, in one final fragment of the nightmare, she began to recognize the faces. She knew them. They were the people she came to Elysium to work with. And then, looming larger in the vision of her dream, the face of Free. And she knew that he was the one she was most worried about, the one who had touched her heart somehow, without her knowing it. His eyes blue, but so unlike the killer's. Warm, not cold. Sympathetic, empathetic, and not psychopathically furious. She watched Free's features alter as agony spread through him. The long, deadly blade of Jason tore him apart from head to toe, splitting him in two. And in a quick swipe of the blade, he cut Free's still-beating heart from his chest. Sky jerked into consciousness, sweating, heart pounding, frightened beyond what she thought she could handle. Tears rushed from her eyes, sobs from her throat, and she felt helpless to stop what seemed inevitable. Waking used to be a relief from the nightmares. Now that she remembered, she feared it even more. What or who would she find at the military complex? And more to the point, what would or could she do about it? Okay, this has been Chapter 3 of Jason X to the Third Power. And I've got to tell you, I really enjoyed tonight's chapter. We're getting a lot of character development. There was a little plug that goes back to Jason X Planet of the Beast, where at the end of that he was shot into space. So this book ties more into that book, to the Planet of the Beast, because it was written by the same author as this book, Nancy Kilpatrick. The only thing they kept from Part 4 was how Jason ended up at this Americana place. But Nancy Kilpatrick is pretty much saying part 4 didn't really happen except for Jason getting there, and she's pretty much connecting Planet of the Beast with this one. So this is the true sequel to Planet of the Beast. And I'm really digging it. You know, Jason's finally in the house. Jason's in the house, folks. Linda's seen him. Brad is believing her. Everybody else is doubting her. And this is how it always goes, you know. Everybody's going to doubt her until the first person dies. And by the time everybody believes her, all hell is broken loose. And I am looking forward to that. So, guys, let me know what you thought of tonight's chapter. What you think of this book going forward. Just drop me a comment. I'd love to hear from you guys. And I'll be back very soon with more of Jason X to the Third Power. Until then, this has been your friendly neighborhood 80s slasher librarian saying, thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't done so already. Spread the word, because when we reach 5,000 subscribers, there's going to be a mega giveaway with several winners. You guys are going to love it. We're so close to 5,000 subscribers. Spread that word, and let's get this giveaway going, guys. I think you're going to enjoy it. Also, click that like button, drop me a comment, as I said before, and check out above the 2 playlists I've provided links to. I think you'll enjoy those books, and it will help set this story up even better for you. All right, guys, have a good night.